in Spain.
Dave Hodgson, The Daily.
Say hi, Dave.
Welcome back to the show. I'm delighted to have in the studio with me Julie McSorley. Have I said your name right, Julie?
You have, Dave.
Good. Just come right in there. And this is a fantastic book because it's all about a fascinating figure, really. Reg Spiers, of course. Not it says Spiers then, but that would have changed it completely. Reg Spiers. And tell us a little bit about him, because he was actually a javelin thrower. So that's a great name, isn't it, for a javelin thrower, and quite an athlete.
You couldn't make the name up, could you?
No.
You really couldn't. Basically, Reg Spiers was a top Australian athlete. He was a top javelin thrower.
Yeah.
And he was in the Commonwealth Games in 1962.
Yeah.
In Perth, and that's where a lot of the British athletes actually met Reg. So the background to this book is actually the fact, and the thing that makes it so amazing, is that all of the things that happened to this guy in his 7-year crime spree actually happened to a top athlete, which is pretty unheard of.
Well, until this year, of course. What's happening in South Africa.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, 2 metres tall, very strongly built person. And again, like we say, we mentioned the name. I mean, we've got Usain Bolt, one of the fastest runners around, but really this is great, isn't it? Spears being a javelin thrower, must have been something there. Now, so he goes into 1962 Commonwealth Games in Perth, of course, Western Australia. And then he then tries to get into the Australian Olympic team in 1964. This is where all the fun starts, isn't it?
This is where the fun starts. This is really what kicks off, we say, kick-starts his life of crime. And this is what actually led to the signature event of the book. So he's travelled to the UK because he basically wants to qualify for the Olympics. And the Australian athletic season by this time is over. And so he's going to use the British summertime. So he gets there in around June 1964. Nothing works out. He has an arm injury. He's got himself a job at the airport. He's staying with the British athlete in Twickenham. And what happens is he has his wallet stolen. So suddenly he's penniless. And he has a young wife and a baby in Australia. And he's desperate to get back. Now, most people in Reg's situation would just say, well, I'm just going to have to wait about a bit. I'm going to have to work some more. I mean, this is a...
So he didn't get into the Olympic Games then, did he?
He didn't make it. He didn't qualify. He didn't... You've got to really just, you know, throw... He had the talent, but javelin throwers are very much governed by a lot of those events. If you've got a bad arm or whatever.
Yeah, it can just be... Yeah, and so he then decides he's got to get back to Australia with no money.
Absolutely, desperate to get back. Most people will wait, but he wasn't prepared to wait. And he hatched a plan with the British javelin thrower to do something really incredible.
So a good friend of his.
A very good friend.
Before we get onto that bit, just tell us a little bit how did he get mixed up in the crime in the crime world and drug smuggling and so on?
Well, the crime world and drug smuggling comes later, because what you've got to realise is that in 1964, these 2 javelin throwers that hatched this plan together were really young. They were early 20s.
Wow.
So the drug thing came
In that
later.
case, let's carry on with the story where it was.
Yeah. So basically, the plan was that John would build him a box. They would send the box to a fictitious address to be collected at Perth Airport. So this is going from Heathrow to Perth Airport.
Cargo, in the cargo.
But the only difference with this is it didn't have rubberised emulsion in, as it stated on the outside of the box. It actually had Reg inside.
Right.
And the first mishap was that the plane was delayed. He hung around at Heathrow Airport for at least 24 hours.
How on earth... How do you get...
I know.
I'm amazed by it. How do you get into the box and get through the airport security? I mean, obviously security is different today to what it was then.
Well, it couldn't happen today, could it, Dave?
No.
Because, I mean, with, you know, terrorism and everything, you just couldn't do it. But they obviously didn't X-ray the box. They just took it on face value. Reg stayed very still. He was stuck in a warehouse at Heathrow Airport. Then the plane went off. I mean... what people are always amazed about, and I think this is the brilliant part to the story, because the imagination starts running. He didn't stay in the box in the cargo hold of the plane. He got out, wandered around, opened up tins of spaghetti bolognese that he had with him, ate, checked out the labels on his fellow freight, did a bit of exercising, as you do, and then got back in the box. But then, you know, it was offloaded in Bombay. He was dangled by forklift trucks. He nearly died of dehydration.
So he's in a warehouse, but obviously if something had been stacked on top of him, he wouldn't have been able to get out, would he? Oh,
it was incredibly dangerous. Yeah. I mean, it was quite foolhardy, but on the other hand, as a guy that wrote about this in the Telegraph a few weeks ago, they devoted a half a page to Reg's story, and the guy said, you know, he's a mad, wonderful, you know, that people think it's silly, but we need people that go out a bit on a limb.
Yeah,
and
characters.
Absolutely. So he eventually did make it home, but the whole journey was 63 hours, 13,000 miles.
And how much did it cost for him to get from England to Australia?
Nothing, because he was cash on delivery. And so when the box was put in a warehouse, and obviously it's not going to be collected because Mr. Graham actually didn't exist, he bust out of the box, he bust out of the warehouse. So
he had to break out the warehouse, really?
He did. Yeah. He actually miraculously found some wire cutters. Yeah. And in those days, we had the old Ansett Airlines. So he waited for an Ansett plane, which was a domestic plane.
Yeah.
Had his passport, of course, but didn't have a ticket. And he just joined the queue walking through. But then the whole problem, you know, didn't end. And you'll probably like this bit, Dave.
Yeah.
Because he still had no money, but he had to get from Perth to Adelaide, which is a long way, with no money. So what do you do when you are down on your luck? You find a priest.
Right.
And he found a local priest in Kalgoorlie, and the priest gave him his train fare for his whole journey back to Adelaide.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So he got back home, and he got back to his wife and a little baby at the time?
Yes,
yeah.
And
baby
the whole story broke, and it was front page news. In the meantime, John was worried sick, because he hadn't heard anything from him, and he wasn't sure if he'd died.
Could he have got into... I mean, was there any repercussions on that from the police or anything like that, or not?
There were repercussions, but everybody went on radio talk shows, just like Talk Radio Europe. All the listeners were phoning in. You can imagine the lines were just jammed, saying, you know, this is very much an Australian way of looking at the world. You know, he's done brilliantly. You can't charge him anything. You know, this guy deserves a medal for what he did, because they were basically wanting to just put the freight charges on him.
Yeah.
Not an airplane ticket, the freight charges.
Wow.
And the freight charges would have been more than a plane ticket.
Yeah. Well, so he got let off in the end then?
He got less off, and he became quite a celebrity for a while, until his next misdemeanours.
And let's just talk a little bit about that. He gets, you know, he's involved now, again, something to do with travelling around again, like travelling around, drug smuggling. Why does he get to the point where he feels he has to do that?
I think it was at a point where his, this is now, we've gone to the 80s, 1980s, and he was at a point where his sporting fortunes had waned. And he's a very adrenaline-fueled sort of guy, as a lot of sportsmen are. And I guess it was the lure of the big bucks. By this time, he'd split up with his wife, and he had a new love of his life. And he got caught in an international drug ring for importing into Australia. And he and his girlfriend skipped bail. After they were indicted, they skipped bail before the case was actually heard. And then he had this incredible road trip, which lasted 7 years, across 3 major continents, including Europe, India, and Africa. And it's an amazing story. He basically got involved with militia groups.
Wow.
He saw a lot of things.
Yeah, I bet he did,
saw a lot of things, but then...
He's not had a dull life, has he?
He hasn't had a dull life. But then there was the crescendo of the whole story, which I don't know if you've got.
I've got the book in front of me here.
You know what
tell me more.
You
tell me more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the real down point of the whole book, I guess, and there is a moral to this story, is that he actually ended up on death row in Sri Lanka.
That's right, and looks like it's all over, doesn't it?
It looks like it's all over. He's given the right of appeal. He sacks his lawyer. He's then... I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens because it'll spoil it for any listeners that want to read the book. We've actually got a couple of really good court scenes there which describe sort of what happened. But, I mean, it's a kind of cautionary tale as well, because at the end of the day, you know, he did the wrong thing, but he actually paid quite a heavy price.
So we're not going to give anything away as far as whether he made it through that or not, but let's just say that it's a fantastic... On the back it says, crazily impulsive, romantic, free-spirited Reg. I suppose that's very an Australian attribute anyway, isn't it? Reg became a national hero, smuggling himself 13,000 miles home as air freight, and later on getting caught up in lots of drugs. Now, his daughter later on also got involved with drugs, didn't she, as well? And was she an athlete as well?
Sadly. No, she wasn't, and sadly that did happen. And, you know, of course, some of the headlines then were quite cruel, because it was, you know, suggesting that there's maybe some sort of genetic thing, which I don't believe. I think that we're all a victim of our times, and if we get involved in the wrong times, and this book is in no way an endorsement of any of those crimes, but it is a very colourful story. And the president of UK Athletics, Lynn Davis, who's written a foreword for the book, has actually said it's, you know, as he says in the foreword, is surely one of the most colourful stories to emerge from the sporting world. Yeah,
and it's almost like a roller coaster of emotions, isn't it? You're smiling and then you're feeling for him as well, and you think it's almost like watching a soap, and you think he's making the same mistake again, and he's and it's kind of what we find fascinating with people like this is that we see them at their best, but we also see them as a flawed character as well. And all of us are flawed, aren't we? So we can relate to that.
Exactly. And we all have had, I'm sure, times in our life, nothing as bad as that, but we've had times in our life where we've probably come to a path that forks, and you have to choose. And it's a very strong character, I think, that doesn't choose the path that actually looks like it's got the most rewards, even if they're easily gained. So I think now one can see through that. I mean, I see him very much as a sort of Jack Nicholson kind of character because I know him. And he's incredibly engaging, incredibly likeable, and people gravitate towards him.
Now, you live here in Spain. You're a Talk Radio Europe listener as well. Is this the first book you've authored, or is this something that is a new hobby for you, or what's all this?
This is the first book that I've actually co-authored with Marcus McSorley, the co-author. I've done a lot of writing, stories, etc., and I've had a very academic life in terms of study, etc. But this is the first book, so that's quite exciting. And I think Marcus and I have got a bit of a taste for writing.
And the Daily Telegraph featured it as well, so that must be quite amazing. Yeah.
Yes, that was wonderful. They just thought it was such a great story, and they talked about the book and how it's actually amazing that it's the first book that's ever been written about this story. We couldn't believe that nobody had done it before.
Now, tell us, how do you know Reg?
Well, the reason I know Reg so well is because the British athlete that actually built the box for him in 1964, who lived in Twickenham, is my husband, John McSorley.
There you are, yeah.
So it's been a story, obviously, that's been in our family for a very long time. And
what was it like for John to kind of relive it and help you write it all? It must have been, were you with John at the time when it happened?
I wasn't with John. I wasn't with John at the time in 1964. No, but he had all the newspaper cuttings. He was still talking about it. Then John and I and Marcus, my co-author, who's asked John and my son, we actually went to visit him in jail on one of the occasions that he was in jail.
Wow.
So that was my first meeting.
And he's been here to Spain to see you as well?
He's been to Spain twice. I'm hoping he'll come again. I'll try and just give you a little anecdote, if there's time,
certainly,
about the sort of guy he is and why you always get left feeling that the story isn't over. On one of the occasions when we visited him in a jail in Adelaide, it was quite a, high security type jail. And we had our meeting, etc. All the guards were around. I'd never been to a jail before, never known anybody that had been in jail. And we're walking out, we've said goodbye to Reg, but he's still walking with us. And he's walking with us out to the car park. Yeah. And we're right out in the car park, and I've looked back, and, I can't even see any guards. Yeah. And I think this is actually the last line of the book, because Marcus was very young at the time. And I could see, my young son, Marcus, thinking, well, how does that work? Yeah. He's supposed to be in jail, but actually he could just get in the car and drive off with us. And he actually says, the last line of the book is, it would be easy to escape from prison, wouldn't it, Mummy? And you sort of think, yes, it would be if you're Reg.
So, did he just walk back in again?
Yes, I don't know whether the guards thought, oh, Reg will be all right or whatever, but he seemed to make his own rules in life, and not a lot of people question them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the book is available. Can you buy it here in Spain? Of course, you can get it on Amazon, I assume.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. I think Book World in Spain, in Puerto Banús, are trying to get it in, but you can get it from online through any of the major bookstores in England, Waterstones, Foyles, etc. Or you can go straight to the website that's got some nice photographs if you want to look and buy it through the website, which is all the W's out of the story. Out of the box story.com.
Okay, and it's Julie McSorley and Marcus McSorley, and the book's called Out of the Box, The Highs and Lows of a Champion Smuggler. Thank you very much for joining me, Julie. Really appreciate your time this afternoon.
My pleasure,
well
Dave.
done.
Thanks for having me.